Let's see. Technology is working, I think. It's Color Space Cadets.
Yeah,
I always like it it's always a slow roll in for me, guys. It's always a slow roll in. All right. Yeah, look at that. I just saw it go live on YouTube.
Oh, there we
I
are.
have to remember always to mute it.
Working, I think.
Somebody didn't mute it on their end.
Yeah, I got to sort the audio out.
It's always a slow roll in for me, guys. It's always a slow.
There we go.
There it is.
There we are. Echo is sorted.
Get to the normal background for us.
Hello, and today, yes, normal. You want normal background? Can I? I'll do the introduction, then I'll switch to my background. I'll switch to my room, or you switch. There we go. Josh is here. Airflix. Are you gonna, Kevin? Are you gonna go to the normal background and then switch?
I'm normal. Oh, you want to? No, this is good. This is my my new home.
All right, let's get started then. And we go in 5.
Right, well, we're waiting for Warren.
We're waiting for Warren.
Yeah,
we don't have to wait for Warren. He's coming from down under. He's coming from down under. There you go.
Yeah, it's early in the morning in Oz.
Joey, I got to tell you, I love the shirt. As always, it is my absolute favorite shirt. I own a bunch of them. I think you, like myself, are one of the few people that recognize right away as a monitor.
That's a good one.
It's a good gag. I like it.
How are you guys?
Hello, welcome to Color Space Cadets. It is Ask the Experts Anything, and here it happens to be Warren Eagles and Kevin Shaw coming from, where are you in the UK?
Sorry, okay. Just south of Shepton Studios.
Stop broke about.
Greenberg.
We have Robbie Carman. Where are you, Mr. Carman?
Just outside of Washington, D.C.
And Joey Deanna. And Joey, where are you?
Also just outside of Washington, D.C.
And I am definitely not Darren Moston. I'm definitely not Darren. I'm Jeff Greenberg. I'm a last-minute fill-in, friend, admirer, and we're here with Color Space Cadets, episode 6, where we ask the experts anything. If you're watching live here, you'll notice on the right side of YouTube is a top chat. We'll be scouring that for questions. I'm going to change my background. There we go, because I want to be in the room with the two of you guys.
Join us.
And that's clever, Jeff.
You know, it's a great set. Do we still have encyclopedias? We clearly do.
Yeah,
and today we are talking, of course, about color. I want to start with something fun. Let's talk a little bit about Resolve 18 on the color. Do you guys have a favorite feature? Something that you go, my God, I love this 3D depth mapping. What do you guys love about 18?
Depth map does it for me. Well, depth map and the Dolby export.
Yeah,
Dolby export's massive. As somebody who has gone through the back-end technical process of developing a Dolby Vision encoding workflow using the developer tools available, being able to just click export is amazing. And the performance of it, because it can use your hardware acceleration. It can use your NVEnc if you have an NVIDIA. It can use the Apple M2 or the M1 acceleration. It's the fastest Dolby Vision MP4 encode you're going to find because it's hardware accelerated. And it's just another step in the wider adoption of Dolby Vision, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, people moan about the encoder in Resolve, though, don't they? I think so, don't they? Well, they used to. Didn't like the quality.
I've heard a lot of people moan about a lot of things in Resolve, and I think a lot of times it can be attributed to workflow errors. But the encoder in Resolve, if you're using the hardware, is the same as it would be in any other software, right? Like the H.265 encoder, if you're using an Apple M1 Mac, or if you're using an NVIDIA card and you have hardware acceleration turned on, it's using those APIs. It's nothing magic in Resolve. So you should expect similar quality results as other solutions if you're leveraging hardware acceleration.
Yeah,
Well, to be fair though, the Dolby Vision encode is a Blackmagic encode is intended for approval. It's not intended for a full-on, streaming delivery.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, you're still going to be delivering the mezzanines to whatever streamer or distributor wants to, but like, Joey was talking about using DE, the Dolby encoding engine. I mean, that took Joey probably 2 months to really kind of get, streamlined and really get all set with the bajillion different hooks in the code. And now just to do that for our clients who want to take a file home, watch it on their OLED at home or whatever, and be able to see it fully encoded is great. I think, Jeff, the favorite features that I have are Blackmagic finally stepping into, kind of, I wish they had done it sooner, but finally stepping into a little bit more of the remote workflow stuff, Sure, clearly the remote database stuff, which we can talk about more, is awesome. That's a great way for people to work. And then also just the remote stuff that they're still kind of developing, right? Like the kind of the review and approval set, the streaming, on supported systems, the streaming, direct streaming out of Resolve, that kind of stuff.
Let's talk about that cloud-based functionality. You're using it like, a lot of us are conservative about going from beta to production. How long have you been actually using Resolve 18 full time?
Yeah, a couple months now, to be honest with you. I mean, we're obviously very nervous about doing betas in that regard, but testing it. And I think just to quickly describe the workflow that Joey and I have going on at our company is that, we have basically 3 different locations. We have the office, Joey's home suite, my home suite, right? And for a long time, we've been syncing media all the time from place to place. So something gets loaded on the office, it automatically syncs to other places. So the media is always where you need it. But the project files were always, look at that. Warren just stepped into your...
Warren showed up. Warren showed up in my place.
I've got a question, Jeff. How do you do that? That's so clever.
Well, he's got to leave too. You got to leave to get back. What I want to know is how you're able to go and move in time like that. Go get out.
I want to know why I'm a different color in your one.
It's because your monitor's not tuned right. Your monitor's not tuned right. Robbie, no,
sorry,
but you're using Blackmagic Cloud. You're using how much storage are you using across sync thing?
A lot. I mean, between our various NASs, my home NAS is like 100 terabytes. Joey's is similar. It's important to understand that the Resolve Cloud is not a media storage tool. It's a database tool, right? So you still have storage wherever you want, locally on a NAS or locally on an SSD or whatever. But in our Joey and I workflow, the problem was always those project files, right? You'd have to say, okay, I'm going to export a DRP, put it on, sync it over to you. Then you have to load that DRP in. Of course, if we were in the same facility at the same time working on the same database, we could go into collaborative mode, right? That's the way you used to do it in the past. But now, because those project files are living in a central repository on the cloud, I can literally say, Joey can say to me, hey, can you open up this project to go to shot number 32 and tell me what you think about this problem, right? And I can open that up, solo, or we can even go into collaborative mode because we have the same media if we wanted. So those collaborative workflows that some facilities have gotten used to with Fairlight and Edit and Color, it's there. And I mean, initially, I think I was skeptical of going, here, Blackmagic, here's all my projects, and do what you do with it. Because it is important to know that you can still do things the old way. You can still run local databases, disk-based database, SQL databases. But the cool thing, too, is if you have a situation where, you're a facility that's doing big tentpole films, putting project files in the cloud is probably not going to work for your clients and for, security purposes. You can actually do this self-hosted, too. You can actually run a version of the Blackmagic Cloud. It just requires that you set it up, with a VPN or some other sort of, tunneling kind of thing to make it happen.
Yeah. So the big
have you done that?
database change in 18 was that the Blackmagic team went in and optimized how Resolve connects to an SQL database, right? Because that was never designed to work over high latency connection like the internet. That optimization allows for them to give the Blackmagic Cloud as a hosted option, which honestly for $5 a month is incredibly good. But that optimization is in Resolve with how it connects to any SQL database. So I've tested it over VPN on like I hooked it up to like the crappiest Comcast cable modem I could find, and 35 megabit connection where the database was hosted, and it was still perfectly interactive and usable, which is a regular off-the-shelf SQL server. So the workflow flexibility is very good.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Kevin, are you using this personally? Or are you allowing them? Are you using it at Mission?
We haven't switched at Mission yet. We it only went beta at the beginning of the week, so we wouldn't run beta. It's too risky. And I only loaded it on my machine last night. So I've been keeping up with all the reports, and I love the depth map. That's kind of the big go-to. I was aware of the Dolby encode. That's like Joey says, that's a real game changer in terms of managing Dolby Vision. But no, it's too early. Even now, I'm not sure I'd put it straight onto a job yet. Haven't tested it enough.
Yeah,
You'll have to tell us when you do, man.
From a stability point of view, I found it to be, I mean, there's always those edge cases. I mean, that's Kevin's doing it the right way. That's the safe way to do it, in a way that I think we should recommend to everybody, is wait for another dot release or two to make that happen. But it's been pretty.
We're on .0.1 now.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But Kevin, I'm curious.
Speaking of .2, Kevin showed up here. There he goes. There.
Kevin, I'm curious about the depth mat. I've been struggling for practical, like, grading uses of it. How do you envision yourself using it?
It's a great way of enhancing depth of field. Like if particularly on the digital cameras, if they haven't got it, that real sort of out of focus background, then I like to use the depth map, because it's really difficult to isolate a background usually.
Right. Sure.
But the depth map can do it really easily.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably
that'd be my most common one.
Probably the common one to use.
Or adjusting, contrast over depth as you get into some hazy environments that maybe they couldn't control, or even if you have, in a lot of cases, I started playing with it with some drone footage, because a lot of times, even on the highest quality camera drones, because people are flying them in the air, they put cheap lenses and filters on, right? And the quality of that footage is always dictated by what glass was in front of the sensor. And so a lot of times, with bright sunlight coming in and maybe some not amazing quality neutral density filters, you get this kind of haze that is not global across the image. It kind of varies as you get further out in the depth, and just qualifying with the depth mat, and then maybe just dialing a little bit of contrast as you go into that depth, very subtly, right? The depth map doesn't make really good hard-edged compositing mats, right? It doesn't replace a roto artist. But if you want a nice, soft representation of the depth of the image that you can gradate a color operation on, it's really, really nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's one that we got from the chat that I'd like to bring in with this, and then I'm going to add a little to it. The question here is, don't you feel you get artifacts with it? And then how do you feel the performance is? With how quickly and easily it is for you to dial in given ranges. Feel free, gentlemen, to rip those two apart.
I think with anything like that, as Robbie said, you don't want to have a hard edge on it. It's always going to be a soft transition. So I haven't seen artifacts so far.
I would say
I haven't used it long enough.
No.
As I've played with it, I've found it does artifact a lot in fast mode. And like you mentioned, performance is a thing. It's a very compute heavy effect. So what I usually do when I'm using it is I dial in the ranges in fast mode, then flip it into better mode and see if that knocks out the artifacting. Yeah. If it doesn't, it's not going to be the answer to every shot, but it might be the answer to 80% of that shot. Guess what? You can just feed its output into another node, power window it, denoise it, deflicker it. You can manipulate the matte it generates after it's matte to remove artifacts with any of your other conventional tools.
Yeah, and you guys are on the Mac Pros, yeah?
Yeah.
Top of the line studios, like 128 gigs of RAM and Ultra,
it's
Macro, whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, it's still pretty slow. I mean, but I agree with Joey. It's just if you think about it, it's really computational. Everything to kind of to riff on what Joey just said. I found like, I was at first when I was playing with it, I was trying to do it for like that bokeh kind of thing, as Kevin was saying, for like, interviews and stuff like that. And I think to riff on what Joey was saying, you can do quite a bit of image cleanup before you hit that. I found like if there was like macro blocking or a lot of noise in the image, like it got confused, and that was going to lead towards more problems. So, I think you have to play where you're going to place it in the node tree, right? Sometimes I could see you doing mat work after it. Sometimes I could think you could see doing massaging, of the signal before you get to that. I think it's just really going to depend on the quality of the footage that you're working with too.
And that's the cool thing, because it's just an image at the end of the day, right? You can break off another branch in your tree and have prep work for it. I'm going to throw some blur. I'm going to throw some power windows or whatever on the image that never actually makes it to your final output, but it dictates how you're feeding in the depth map.
Yeah.
So having it all in a node-based pipeline gives you flexibility.
And to one more kind of thing like that too, though, I found that besides the depth map thing, I don't know, it feels like cheating, but the improved AI magic mask stuff, I think it's getting scary how good it is, right? I had this situation the other day where I had somebody gesticulating with their hands very fast, right? And I was getting a lot of problems with keying it, with motion blur and all that kind of stuff, and it was going to be a pain, windowing it. I just ran it through that magic mask, and it's like, oh, these are hands, and it was just like, bam, done like that. I think that is going to be really a place to, like in 17, it was a little gimmicky, I think. And now in 18, the improvements of that's a big feature update for me as well.
Yeah. Just got a question for Joey. This is from Jessica in Sydney, Australia. I love fast cars, motorbikes, weightlifting. Are you married? If not, can she have your number?
I agree with you on all of those fronts, but unfortunately, I am married to an absolute angel.
Okay.
That wasn't a plant. You sure that wasn't a plant?
That was a completely fabricated comment.
Right, because if it was real, it would be asking about Christmas lights and hot tubs.
I did
not.
I forgot that bit. Yeah. Okay. What else? What's next? Do we got one about looks, Jeff?
I want to go somewhere soft. We just went somewhere hard. Let's go somewhere soft. Where do you guys find inspiration to explore new looks that you might end up using in real life projects? And do you have anything that inspires you when it comes to new looks?
I'll start on that. I just think, obviously, look at quite a lot of shows and what other people are doing. You don't have to look at the whole show, but grab as many examples as you can. I try and grab stills or grab trailers and look at things. And then when you've got half an hour free or an hour, you just sit down with the sort of footage that you normally work with and just try some things. Go really extreme, back them off, go half opacity on things, and add those and keep them sometimes as power grades or defaults or whatever software you're using, and just keep practicing. You never stop doing different things, and then you have confidence to do it in front of a director. And that's the thing that people find hard, is actually throwing something out there in case the director disses it or doesn't like it. Never be worried about what they might say. Most of them love the fact you're doing stuff.
My approach has changed a bit now that I'm working more with on-set teams and getting involved in grading much earlier. My sort of default answer to that question is I always like to start with the script. I think it's all about concept, and I don't like to really be discussing a look from another show unless there's a really good reason to do it. So I like to start with the script, but I find that because I'm working with the DPs, often prior to shooting, and sometimes during shooting, they usually have a bag of LUTs and stuff in their, they're trying, and then they'll kind of throw those out, and I try and keep them on track with, well, what are you trying to say with this look? And then we'll kind of grow out of that. So we're kind of modifying something from another show. But I think that anything can inspire you.
I was just gonna say, Warren, like you said, when you go in, you try a bunch of random things, like exploring with the imagery. And Kevin, if they do have some LUTs that they like, that might not be the greatest way to actually make a final grade, right? So you might land on something that on one shot looks incredible for what you need, but obviously whatever you built dynamically isn't going to work across the entire film. But then you can look at that critically and say, okay, what am I responding to in this image? And then rebuild it again in a more thoughtful way from that exploration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, usually what I find is exactly that, Joey, that we, maybe we don't like the contrast, but there's something really nice about the skin tone or the color, or maybe we don't care much for the color, but there's something about the contrast, or maybe it's the average picture level, something like that. So we just kind of look what works for the show, and then these LUTs, and it could be looks, it could be postcards, it could be a lookbook. That's our starting point.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I agree with all that. I was going to say, I don't think anybody, at least I don't ever go into it with the idea of complete imitation of these things, right? It's like what the parts that you like out of the emotive parts of what you like. I actually have found Instagram to be one of the best resources for this for me, because it's amazing how many super high-end colorists are sharing their work. And the best thing when they share their work, right, they're sharing often the best frames of that work, right? So it's really kind of cool to see, what the top end commercial colorists are, feature colorists are doing. I don't, Kevin, the Color Society, I mean, like, right, like you're re-gramming, I guess is the word, a lot of, these top end ones. So I find that inspiration. The other one that I bought a subscription to earlier this year, and I to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure how I'm not quite sure how they do all this legally, but
how they get around rights.
Yeah, I have that too. Yeah, it is very cool.
How did they get permission?
I find it to be really, because it's not just, it's so many attributes of the image, from framing to, framing, gender, whether it's sunny, whether it's raining, whatever it is.
Color.
And they keep, every time I log in there, they seem to be evolving their search and categorization better, which really goes into what we were all kind of talking about, of critically looking at an image and trying to figure out what you're responding to that you like, or what the client is responding to that they like, because everybody talks about color in their own terminology.
Well, so that's actually the thing, right? Is that, like, I think for creatives, like for a DP or whatever, like for a colorist, Shot Deck makes sense in the way that we use that. I actually think it's a great educational tool for clients that are struggling with some of the vocabulary to communicate in a session, because they can visually look at images that are famous and they know and whatever, and you can break down that based on all these different attributes. I think it's a great way to start those conversations a lot too.
Yeah.
And then you can break it out and be like, show me similar, and kind of continue the exploration.
It's a phenomenal engine.
The newer ones have the colorist name on there as well, so that's another resource.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's aware. It's Lawrence Shore. It's the guy who was the DP of the Joker. I interviewed him 2 years ago, and it was super beta at that point. And we showed it during the talk. I'm still like blown away at how much he's updating it. And then what Robbie said, how are they handling the rights, man? How are they handling it?
Is he monetizing it? Do you have to pay for it, Jeff?
Yeah, it is. It is, because he's got a development team on there now.
Right. Okay. What's it? How much is it? $10 a month?
Like $50 a year,
like $100 for the year or something like that. But I mean, it's
reasonable.
Cool. It's cool to go back to and look at, pre-modern color grading kind of films too, and get, like, I've been looking at a lot of, like, I just bid on a music video that was all black and white, right? I was going back and looking at, like, noir type stuff from, the 30s and 40s, and kind of, it's just a really cool resource.
Another thing I do, I look at a lot of stills, fashion photographers, and go back and look at, like, what they were doing in the 60s and when they're experimenting with in light rooms and with film stocks and those sort of things. It only has to be stills. I've got a buddy of mine was a fashion photographer. English guy, went out to Australia and shot a lot of fashion late 60s, 70s. And it's really interesting to look at the things they were doing. And then you try and reproduce that or get something close to that. So that's a good resource as well, stills.
And another thing that I like about the Color Society's Instagram is it's a very international mix. And it's a great way to get fresh ideas, is to pull ideas from halfway around the world, and very often you can see some really interesting ideas that are new to your
Yeah, and that
market.
gets forgotten a lot. The fact
Yeah.
that different cultures and different locations have, in general, pretty widely varying sets of preferences when it comes to imaging and looks and style.
It's amazing. I mean, Kevin and Warren, Jeff, you've done a little bit of this, but like, traveling to Asia and specifically, right? Like we go to do some teaching, and we're like, oh, it's all about grain and noise and grunging things up, and they're just, yeah, no, we don't like that. It's really that.
It's like, why are you doing this at 24 frames a second?
I think we've done a great job there. Let's move on a little bit. We've got this question from the audience. I think it's pretty strong. I'm repositioning from selling services to selling my way of thinking. Asking questions in pre-production for clarity on scope, emotional intent for project. Is that enough to charge more? How else to sell thoughts?
Well, so I do that, but I don't charge more for it. I just include it as paid time. So if you're consulting before the grade, that's paid time. You're on the clock. So I charge for it by the hour. That's how I deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things at play here. There's one, expanding the scope of what you're doing, right? Which is always a good thing. But also then it's, yes, how do you charge for it? I don't know if it's really another service or if it's just this part of my service is worth your investment in time and money.
Well, I will say that a lot of our colleagues, ourselves included, are gregarious information sharers, right? Like we like to solve people's problems, do that. And it's funny. I tell Joey specifically this all the time, but quite a few other people I know as well is like, don't give away the farm, right? Like that half an hour that you just told somebody, how to, reinvent the wheel and fix all their problems. Like you could have been consulting for that. So I think it's a fine line between being a good person and trying to help somebody out in a time of need or whatever versus, nickel and diming people. And you got to kind of get a feel for that. But I do think a lot of us in general could be monetizing, as the question asked, could be monetizing that time more. But I agree, if you're gonna charge for it, just put it as a line item, pre-production meetings or whatever you want to call it, and make some. I
think the reason you have to be careful is very often you can do this consulting and not get the job. So in the early days, I was doing a lot of this consulting work, not charging for it, and then finding that they just gave all my ideas to the editor. Sometimes they'd ask you to do a pre-grade and stuff.
It's like a pitch.
Give it to the editor, tell him to match it.
Yeah.
So you've got to have it as a line item. If you later decide to discount it and say, look, that's included in the grade price, I think that's fair game. But you just need to protect yourself.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to do also, because we can't always say that every project is going to be exactly the budget we want it to be, but sometimes we might take a project on because we think we like working with the team, or if it's maybe for a nonprofit or something like that, put everything on the invoice and then discount accordingly. That way you're never representing yourself as not valuable.
Yeah, I would just say one last thing to this. I mean, essentially this kind of comes down to thought leadership kind of stuff, right? Like, are your thought, your way of doing something so unique and valuable, that process so valuable that somebody wants in? And
Robbie is actually a thought leader.
there's a lot of this, obviously, in the world of self-help, and real estate comes to mind, personal finance gurus come to mind, right? People selling systems and selling these kind of things. If I was a client, I'd be a little weary of that, because when it comes to what we do in this creative world, there's not a lot of that stuff that's so proprietary. The artistry is proprietary, right? But designing a workflow is not it's just hard work.
It's not really
but if you get in with the client and really talk about the artistic intent, that can also be a way to kind of join yourself into the project, right? Show some ownership artistically with the client. Show them that, hey, I want to work on this. Here's my artistic ideas. I want to collaborate with you, and give them a taste of that collaboration a little bit. I think with the right client, that can help get you the job.
Yeah, I think it just raises your brand and your level. I think that's what that does.
And it raises the quality of the show too, because if you can get involved at that level, then you're talking about how the shots are made, you're talking about wardrobe and makeup, and that's going to save them a ton of money in post when you come to finish it. So so I think it is billable, but it's not general workflow. These are not general questions. These are very specific questions, individual to a project.
Yeah, you might lose one, but you've then put your cards on the table, which might get you the next one. If the, post soups or producer, director goes, oh, I like the approach there, and you might be good for this next one. That's how I see it, I think.
Okay. I think that the really nice sum piece there, though, is that it's an hourly, it's part of your services. And the idea that you've got thought it's your all this and some insight.
It definitely has value. Whether or not you put it on the bill I think is a separate issue, but it definitely has value and we should appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I've got one.
Yeah.
I've got one, can I? Somebody said to me, like obviously when Kevin and I and you guys have all done training at different times, the training landscape in 2022, somebody said to me, what's now the best way to learn? Where we think, will we be back in classrooms? Is it going to just stick on Zoom? One-on-one consulting, we're seeing a bit more of that for iColorist. What do you guys think is going to be the fit, and what do you suggest to young colorists to want to make the move?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I first just a broader 50,000 foot view of that. I was thinking about this the other day, right? 15, 20 years ago when we started teaching, whatever, Final Cut, the 3-way color corrector and Final Cut Pro 3 or 4, whatever it is, right? Like, I just felt like back then we're teaching a lot of core concepts, how to read scopes, contrast, all that kind of stuff. I feel like the user base that's hungry for color training I don't know, I feel like they developed some sort of relative baseline competency, right, about how this stuff kind of works and some of the verbiage. Like, I'm finding people much more interested in things that I would used to consider high end, right? Color management stuff and, building, delivery pipelines and stuff like that. So I think that the people have changed a little bit too, just because so much of that knowledge is out there, the work that you guys have done, we've done, whatever. But I don't know. I think that's a good question for you to answer, Warren, because you've done a little bit of all of it, right? I mean, you're traveling around the world. You've been in classrooms. You've transitioned your business to be, giving, online stuff.
Well, I suppose, and suppose until I fly to New York, put myself in a hotel for a week, and no one shows up, then we'll have the answer.
Yeah.
But I think less. There definitely will be less. But I think some people will really value classroom, like some of you guys with kids value the teaching because homeschooling was difficult. Appreciate the teacher, and there's no doubt about it. It's definitely better than Zoom because you are there and no one's looking at phones or answering the doorbell, and you are right there. So some people will value that. Whether that will be enough people to make it financially viable, I don't know. Until we try.
So let me throw in something a little bit there. I think there's a couple different things, but I don't think any of us would argue that the best way to actually acquire new information, whether it's woodworking or HDR pipelining, is working interactively with another human being. Nobody goes, hey, I'd like to learn the violin. Let me hit play on YouTube. Would you guys all agree with that?
Yeah.
Right. So the use of just in time, I'll just search, is powerful. The knowledge base is wide. The struggle is, if it's not Darren, on what he's got on his YouTube channel, it's definitely a struggle to evaluate or Colin Kelly. It's definitely a struggle to evaluate whether or not the material we're looking at has value. Well, and I'm assuming like when Robbie, or Kevin or Joey or Warren, that when you're getting like that cutting edge piece out of Dolby, you're talking to Dolby directly. You're not watching, unless you've created, Joey and Robbie, the pieces for them. So I've got a little different feel of this, Warren, which is I think that this remote world has intrinsic value, but when it's a communicative classroom, maybe in 3 hour smaller blocks. Go ahead, Robbie.
I think you're right. To me, I have found the biggest thing in the world where anybody can be an expert by going on YouTube, right? I've actually found in talking to a lot of people, students and the colleagues about this, I actually think you used the right word. I think communicative is the most important thing about this, not necessarily the actual block of training, right? Like it's not the actual like, hey, I'm teaching you this tool. It's the communication back and forth that like, you know, if I was in a classroom with Warren, that's what I'm really paying for with Warren, right? I mean, obviously it's his knowledge, but it's his real time, or Kevin, the real time ability to go, yeah, that's cool. Have you thought about doing it this way or whatever? And like, you know, that kind of riffs on the monetization thing that we were talking about earlier. Like it's unbelievable how during the pandemic, people just come out of the woodwork and just like, hey, do you have 5 minutes to jump on a quick call, or can I Slack you, or can I do whatever it is about that? And I found that people need that real-time communication, whether it happens on a call like this or whether it happens in a classroom. I think that's the most vital thing, is the real-time back and forth, rather than watching a video somewhere in a box and having to wait, you know, a couple days for a response about a question.
Yeah,
I think the big shift too is where that training is coming from. So, you know, we've seen with Dolby, for example, that they shifted from sending people into a facility to do the training to moving it more online, and of course that's partly because there's so many people they've got to manage with bigger numbers. I'm on the ACES workshop for the logo program, and they're going to do something similar. So they want to have a system where they can approve a facility or an individual and make sure that they are aware of ACES in a way that would let them educate somebody and build a pipeline and not make errors. And all of this comes around from people protecting their intellectual property. So, I mean, ACES is open source, but they want to make sure that it's used properly. Dolby Vision is licensed, but they still want to make sure that it isn't messed up in the application of the project. So I'm seeing more film schools. I'm seeing government funding. I'm going out to Taipei in September to the Taipei Film Commission. There's a lot more finance coming in from the industry, whereas previously it was very much up to an individual to put themselves in a classroom. So I think that's the big shift, is where this information and this communication is being arranged.
That's a good point. And I do think that, you know, I used to joke, Jeff, you know, the early days of, you know, Apple and Adobe and Avid certification. I used to joke, it's like, cool, it's a piece of paper you have in your hand that you're, you know, kind of certified by one of these groups. But I actually think I'm not laughing at it like the way I used to laugh at those kind of programs and that kind of certification anymore, because I do think that we're getting to the point where so many people have access to so many of these tools that were once considered high end or, you know, specialized or whatever, that, you know, weeding people out, you know, the competency is an important thing. I think that's going to become, you know, more needed for employers, for, you know, productions that are looking to staff up with the right people and that kind of stuff. And I think to go back to the Dolby thing, and it's interesting about the ACES workflow one too, you know, one of the things I think that Dolby did right with their certification process, right, is that, you know, if you're, you know, knowledgeable, you can just take the test and, you know, move forward, or you can take a class, which is good. But the thing that was really good is they had a practical part of it, right? It's not just like, here's a multiple choice question. It's like, no, you got to do it. Here's a project, you know, do the analyzation, right? Make some trims, do whatever you need to do. And I think that's an important part, because just taking a test doesn't really mean there's good test takers, there's bad test takers. I think practically doing stuff is a better sign of where people might exist as well.
1,000%. So we're definitely saying a combination, Warren. You know, the question of where to best learn is definitely a combination based on your skill. But I'm going to sum it up with saying, I think we're all agreed that some component that involves a feedback loop of real time is the best way to learn, especially when it comes to the merge of art and technical.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I will say though, as the pandemic kind of went on, one real good thing in my mind was I feel like the post-production and colorist community became more connected, right? I met a ton of people online in various Zoom chats and events like this and stuff like that. Especially definitely the mixers, Warren, that you guys put on. Just some of the connection in the industry, because everybody was locked down at home and trying, we shrank the world a little bit. And I feel like that's a good thing for all of this.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and I agree with you too. And then like I found that need, that desire to communicate with people during lonely times when you're not having that interaction was beneficial just from a contact point of view, but also it's like, wow, I'm talking to somebody that like is sharing bits of information that I never knew, or I didn't look at it that way. And so like I feel like during this time period I've actually, I don't know, smarter is the word, but like my repertoire of techniques and skills and that kind of stuff have improved because of talking to people that I might not necessarily talk to every day if it's always in person.
And Robbie, you've had a bit of a break now since Mixing Light. Have you got a new plan? Do you want to get back in that field, or you're done?
No, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, like, I think here's the only thing I would say that's a reality to me is that yin and yang of doing the creative work and then explaining the work, and the technical part is always going to exist for me, right? Like I've been doing it since, I was 20 years old talking about it. I'm going to still talk about it. I just haven't quite figured out what that next thing that's going to really kind of fulfill me is, you know what I'm saying? And, but I'm always looking to do that. I mean, I'm slowly stepping my feet back into those waters, doing some, in-person training and, that kind of stuff. But no, we'll see what the future holds. I think what's most important to me is, and I'm sure you guys feel this way all the time from teaching, is just making that, that impact on somebody and that real difference. That's always the high. It's not necessarily making a tutorial somewhere. It's more of, hey, did somebody get something out of this? And that's kind of what I'm always chasing.
100%. Let's move off of learning and let's do a little bit about, let's go a little hardcore for a moment. What sort of color management is your mainstay? Is it ACES? Is it RCM?
You know my answer.
Yeah, I think we can have very different answers from everybody here.
So, okay, let me preface this, right? My favorite color management is the one that is scene referred and works well for your project and your artistic intent and your workflow. The fact that more people are using color managed workflows is much better for everyone. I want everything that is possible to be color managed to be color managed. Yeah. What system and how you use it is less important to me. Preference, just love ACES.
Yeah. My default is ACES. I totally agree. I mean, number one, scene referred with color management, pretty much anything is better than not doing it. But yeah, I like traditional ACES. I like to do it at a project level, not a node level. And I've just over the years found ways around the difficulties. We have to mention ACES 2.0 should be out before the end of the year. That will be huge with the new LTM that reverses out the RRT. So a more flat version of ACES is going to be huge. But yeah, and I think as a community,
but even also available now with ACES 1.3, the gamut compression tools that are in there now has solved
that's fantastic.
One of the biggest issues that people had with ACES.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting, the 2.0 rollout, because I think that a lot of and Kevin, you probably know more about this than anybody, but I think, a lot of the member companies have had, a lot of input on new tone curves and the way that we handle ODTs and the way that cameras are profiled and all that kind of stuff. I think the various working groups of the ACES ecosystem have really been doing a lot of hard thinking and a lot of discussion back and forth and really thinking about these things. I would agree. I'm mainly an ACES person. I'm more an ACES node-based guy for lots of different reasons. But I think one of the interesting things about the proprietary systems that I don't know if this, I can't say this is generally true because I haven't used all of them, but I just find there's a lot more switches in a lot of the proprietary systems than compared to Aces. And that's one thing I really do like about Aces is just like, no, this is my input, this is my output, like you do the math, like you do the hard work for me, rather than 47 different, OOFs, OOTFs, and EOTFs, and all these things to choose from.
Agreed.
Tone curve.
Yeah,
Like, it gets confusing, and I think it's also a little off-putting to people who don't have, a deep color science background. It can be a little intimidating.
Yeah, on your shows, guys, like your shows, is whether you use the color management, is that coming from the VFX guys, the post-production supervisor, or yourselves are driving how you want to work?
I think more ourselves. I think one thing that we've been trying to do is upsell HDR workflow as much as we can. And whether just even if it's just a line item in every bid, like, hey, this is what it would take. And in the Aces pipeline, we found it tremendously easy just to set up our node trees to have, do a quick ODT switch up to P3D 65, 1,000 nits, whatever. And it's great.
And that's honestly one of the best HDR sales tools in the world. Is you wait till you have an SDR grade the client's in love with and super happy with, and you just flip that switch and say, this is what it looks like in HDR. Because their creative intent, everything there is still, it's not going to be a surprise to them, right? It's creatively going to look very, very similar to what they're used to. And as you've graded it in SDR, you probably haven't done anything that in Aces, when you flip to HDR, is going to result in like thermonuclear highlights, right? When you switch to HDR, it becomes a pretty, subtle HDR grade. It's not going to 11 by default. You can always expand it out to that if you want to for a creative reason, but just flipping it over to HDR and looking at it, you can just see that little bit more of effective contrast. It's just visually instantly something that sells. And
I think a lot of people have asked over the years doing that workflow is like, well, but hey, Dolby says you should do an HDR first, and then kind of go down that side of the pipe. I think we found over the years that from an ability to upsell somebody into a service that they are iffy about, the SDR workflow with that switch into HDR is a far more effective tool than sometimes just starting at the HDR, right? Because when you start at the HDR and somebody's already nervous about it, and then you have to go the other way down, you're like, but you're making compromises in my SDR version. Like that's where, it can get too over-explainy, and I don't know. So we found that way to be.
It's one of those things where it's just, if you can keep the client in their comfort zone, everything gets easier. You know what I mean? Like if the client is comfortable and happy and not apprehensive, and they don't have to worry about workflow stuff, they're not thinking about the technical stuff. They can just look at the pictures and say, I like this, make it a little bit more blue, make it a little bit more green, whatever. Yeah. You're going to have a much better session and much better overall process on the project with them.
Yeah, client is king. Yeah.
I do love that upsell. I agree that the upsell, that switching the monitor. Now I've made a policy in my room. I made a policy that I won't switch it to HDR until they've signed off on the SDR.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I do love that minute. I just wanted to raise another point though, that color management can mean different things to different people. And for me, the big difference between color management in the grading suite and color management on the project is that when you're working on a project, you really want that color management to transition from onset through editorial. You've got to be able to apply it as a match in visual effects. And so proprietary solutions are much, much more complicated in that setup. So I think the Academy really did a good job of opening that door and letting us see how it could work.
Yeah, and I've been saying this for a while now. I feel like there's a lot of post-production tools out there in the ecosystem that don't have any color management or have kind of poor color management that they've developed themselves. It's open source. The Academy has built this, done all the really hard color science research and math, tested it, and it's completely open source. And it's an industry standard. I feel like Aces should be a baseline capability for any post-production software at this point. That would give anybody color management options. By all means, if you want to make your own color management system or have options sure, but I feel like if you're building a imaging product in post-production, having aces into it at this point should be a basic like
And the
requirement.
biggest casualties here are edit software. I just wished edit software understood scenery third color managed pipelines.
Joey and I talk about Premiere Pro in this regard all the time. About
I didn't want to name names,
the
but
work-
yeah.
I wasn't naming names, but
I mean, but any of them. I mean, any of them.
Yeah,
The
none of
work
them
is
do
already
it.
the work has already been done, right? I mean, I'm not making light of how the programmers had to do what they do to implement it, but like the bulk of the work has been done, and we find that one frustrating as well. I would just say one last thing is that the color management stuff that people react to with aces in particular, I think that's part of the most exciting thing about aces 2.0 is adding in features that the tweakers really want, right? The ability to, like, you can leave this simplified and really easy, but adding some additional stuff to let those tweakers tweak, I think is going to make it even a stronger system.
Yeah, and the gamut compression is a really good example of that. I mean, what a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Kevin, because you might know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
On the topic of Aces 2.0, I was actually thinking about this earlier today. One of the workflows that I do semi-regularly, and it's one of the reasons why I use kind of a node-based Aces workflow, is I'll take whatever format that comes in and I'll color space transform it into log C so I can all use the log C IDT. Because remember, the IDTs for Aces 1 were generally developed by the camera manufacturers. So some of RE's rendering intent is built into their IDT versus the output transform. Whereas in Aces 2.0, we're moving more towards the Aces committees are making all of the IDTs. Do we see that as having much of an impact on the capabilities?
I'm not sure. You may know more about that than I do. I'm not sure that's exactly right. I think the manufacturers are very much in the program, and that's part of the sponsored logo thing. But what we're finding, that one of the biggest bottlenecks for using Aces is, there isn't an IDT, and not everybody's comfortable making an IDT. So the way around that is to build a larger pool of standard IDTs, even if the manufacturer is not willing to put that work in.
Got it.
I'm gonna come back just a little bit to the HDR and discussion around these color managed workflows. When do you think somebody is going to go? When do you think the switch is going to flip between people coming in saying SDR? Yes, HDR, to like, no. It's like, Robbie, is your work now 70% HDR and everything else? Where would you say that balance is right now? Let's do it like that.
I don't know. It's hard to say where the balance is. I think we as practitioners / evangelists of it have to just keep pressing. I mean, I think that's where, when we invested heavily in the gear and the certifications and all that to do it, it wasn't because I had these illusions of grandeur of like doing Game of Thrones or some like huge tentpole thing. It was more about, oh look, I can add a whole lot of saleable value to an independent filmmaker's potential property, right? And going, hey, these streamers, they all want content. If it's HDR, even better. Right. And I can say to this independent filmmaker, hey, you can compete from a sellability point of view with larger productions. And we keep doing that. And we keep doing, the line items on every bid to say, hey, we can do this in HDR. One of the things that I don't know if you guys have been doing as well, but I've been really thinking about more and more is offering, not just Dolby Vision stuff, but like doing YouTube versions of these pieces as well, because it's easier for people to see there and that kind of stuff. So I don't know, man. I think clearly a lot of people have seen more and more HDR over the past couple of years, right? I think more and more people are understanding that it's not just a luminance thing. There's a lot of other characteristics to it. But I still think it's within us in our creative community to keep pressing that and keep explaining it and keep showing it and that kind of stuff.
And that's where I think that one little feature in Resolve 18, you can export a Dolby Vision MP4, right? Everybody has an Apple device now with a very good HDR display built in. Now we can
Yep.
take a project, send it to a client, they look on their iPhone and say, wow, this is what it looks like in HDR. Is it the
Jeff,
most ideal viewing
and
environment?
Jeff,
No,
and
I
Jeff,
wanna
actually,
know.
we-
I want
They
to
can
bring
throw
up.
it on their TV. They can throw it on their iPad.
We just had
Go
a
ahead,
project
Robbie.
that Joey. We just had a project that Joey. Just to give you an example of this, we had a project that Joey graded. This film called The Road to the Galena. It was a beautiful film, well shot, and they had no intention at all of doing HDR at the start of the project. But like Kevin was saying earlier, got the SDR approved. Oh, by the way, you want to see this over in HDR? The clients are in the room. Joey has his pipeline set up where he just has to flip a switch. And next thing you know, it wasn't just looking at one or two shots. They're like, let's keep watching. This is great. Let's keep watching. This is great. And then
That's
eventually
fantastic.
they were like, hey, what is it gonna take to do the whole film in HDR? Joey's like, well, I kind of already did the pass in HDR, so it's pretty much ready. Like, that kind of thing.
I would have said a week. I would
And
have said
that's
a
another
week.
thing that I always kind of evangelize to other colorists is, since like we all agreed, use color management, right, as your number one thing. But then even if you don't have an HDR reference monitor, if you're playing around with HDR on a consumer monitor, you might not be doing commercial HDR jobs. Take the projects that you think are really good, some of your best work, redo them, flip them into HDR, and start exploring the visual language of grading in HDR. That way your eye is a little bit more comfortable with it, and you've got that time in the chair experience for when it comes, because it
Has
will come.
anyone seen this new iPad?
I'm gonna go. Let me bring that up because
Yeah.
I got that question last night from somebody, and if somebody has played with it, it's going to be Joey or Robbie. And it's basically this: have you had a chance to play around with the reference mode on the new 12.9 iPad Pro XDR and iOS 16?
Absolutely. It's, first of all, right now it's beta only. So if
I haven't tried the beta software, but I do have the iPad.
If you want to run it,
We're talking the beta.
16, you have to run iOS 16 beta. I have put, yes, I have done it, and I put a meter on it, and it is exceptional. I put my reference level Spectro, a CR300 on it, and it's about as good as you could expect from $1,000 device. I mean, like, very minor Delta E's. I would have no problem sending that to somebody and going.
And that said, even on the non-beta firmware, when you take those MP4 encoded Dolby Vision files, I've taken films that we've done in Dolby Vision, iPad here playing the encoded file, full 3000 nit grade playing on the XM310K, and perceptually it is very, very, very good.
Robbie, can you quickly just talk about just one sentence or two about the connection path coming out of Resolve to that? Is there one, or is it?
Well, so you could, I guess, if a local level, you could use Sidecar, right, and attach, and run it as a second monitor from your system on the same network. That's always a possibility. There are third-party. I'm forgetting what the third-party tools that do the same extended desktop thing with iPads.
You could do NDI.
Yeah. The way that our use is something like Streambox or SetStream or Looper.io, one of these streaming platforms, sending the iPad out to a client to view, right? So there's still a couple things in the way of that, web color management, et cetera. But it gets things. I mean, those screens are already very good, and this is just that little extra tweak. To be clear, it's not so much, in my feeling about it, it's not so much a calibration thing as it more is a settings thing. Turning off auto brightness, right? Turning off true tone, turning off these things that all in one switch you can do without having to depend on the the end user to go multiple places to change.
Excellent. I just want to. We got a question in the chat that I think is worth really kind of quick. Is anybody using the what is it? The Cloud Box, the Blackmagic Cloud Storage Cloud Pod yet?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I haven't yet. No. I do want to get the little baby one though, the one that just has a USB input and Ethernet,
then plug
so I can
stuff
just take
into
a
it.
client drive, plug it in, copy. I want that on my desk.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I have not gotten one yet.
Yeah.
Kevin, I got one here just for you, and others feel free.
Did you
Can
want
you
my
share
phone
more
number?
about your? Yeah. Surprisingly, she's into Christmas lights and cars and a bike. And once Joey over that, but for you, can you share more about your role as a colorist before you get on the set and when you get on set?
Oh, so this is my my role with Mission Digital, who are a DIT company essentially, and my role as head of color is to oversee the pipeline. So that means basically checking what the pipeline is, and then making sure that the LUTs and IDTs, color space transforms, work like that, so that editorial get matching dailies, and then visual effects are generally part of their contract is they have to export matching outputs to the editorial dailies. They have to be an exact match. So that can only happen if we're all using the same color science and we share out the LUTs and all that sort of thing. And that's what it is. And it's kind of just solving problems, like Joey said earlier. You've got a new, Venice 2 gave us some issues because people wanted to start using it before there are IDTs for it, or you've got a drone going up, and how do you make that fit into, say, an ARRI log C workflow? So it's just, and at first I didn't think there would be a job to do that, because I thought, well, anybody can do that. But everybody has such different points of view, and most people are very focused on a particular part of the whole pipeline that they don't see the big picture. And so we get people saying, well, why can't we just do the DJI stuff in Resolve, and then the ARRI stuff is going to be on an ARRI workflow? That's, well, because it's not repeatable. It's got to be repeatable. So yeah, I talk to DPs, I talk to directors, I talk to post supers, I spend a lot of time with the DITs, and I spend a lot of time with colorists. So very often there's a colorist involved, but they don't have the time to do all of this. So I'm kind of acting as their proxy and kind of looking after their best interest, making sure that what ends up can be conformed. And there's a record, a paper record of what the CDL was, what the LUTs were, what the color science was. And it just makes the job so smooth. It's fantastic.
I want to
a good
do this
workflow is
because
always
we're
one
hitting
where
the top
everyone's
of
on the
the
same
hour.
page.
We're hitting the top of the hour, and I'm clearly filling in as the poor man's Darren. And Darren specifically asked this: are you running V18? And you guys covered this a little. Hi, Kev. Are you guys running V18 now on your main suites? I'm tempted after a long grade today in 17, knowing the tools I could have used. He obviously couldn't make it here. I filled in. I'm the uglier, poorer version of him. Gentlemen, how many of you are 100% on 18, still going back and forth?
Please back
Joey,
up your
Robbie?
please back up your databases
Back up your
before
database.
making this move, no matter
Yep.
what, and verify it's backed up.
And don't do
before-
it in the middle of a really important job.
Yeah, don't do it in the middle of a job, and make sure
So-
you have the database. And I would also add, if you have several recent important projects besides the database, just spend a minute to export separate explicit DRPs as well.
Still,
so you
What
have
you
those
should be
handy.
doing on an interval anyway.
still.
I had the beta on my assist station for the entire run of the beta. And I'll say this, after having done this for a long time and gone through the Blackmagic beta to release cycle many times, I would say in my experience, this has been the most stable Resolve public beta they've done. It was really, really, really buttoned up. It's a beta. There's always going to be issues. That's the point of the beta, so we can find those issues before release. But in general, this was the most stable public beta that I've seen. And I didn't have any massive showstopper or appreciable problems. I could have been on 18.
Okay, so we're 75% or 85% on 18. Kevin, what will be the magic switch, man? What will be the spot where you go, let's do it?
.2.
Well, there's two things that I need to look out for, as head of color at Mission. The first thing that would throw the switch is if, for example, there was Venice 2 support in 18 and I couldn't get it in 17, that would be a no-brainer. So that would cause us to switch early. Other than that, because we're building rigs and we put a disk image on the rigs, I need to be happy that it's stable on I have it running on a couple of systems that I'm testing. When I'm happy that's stable, it'll go to the disk image, and then we'll start raising it with workflow documents and saying to the whole chain, are you happy for us to move to 18? Because everybody in the workflow has to sign up and do the same thing.
Yep.
So
Agreed.
it'll probably be
Exactly
about a
right
month,
tactic to
let's
take.
say.
All right. I think we've done a really nice hour of this stuff. We've gotten some great questions. We've gotten some great answers and some great back and forth. I'd like to do a wrap at this point. And to do this, of course, I'm going to ask the standard stuff. Where can we find you? And is there anything right now that you want to promote? Joey, sir, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I'm Joey Deanna. You can find me I'm on Twitter. I'm on Mixing Light. I'm on most of the Resolve Facebook groups as well. I'm pretty public out there. Something to promote. Robbie and I just finished a fantastic independent feature film called The Road to Galena. It's available on Apple, iTunes, Amazon, VOD right now.
Great, man. Thanks for joining.
Joey Carman.
Thanks, Joey.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Robbie Carman. Yeah.
Yeah, all the same places that Joey said. I find myself spending a lot of time on Instagram these days. I'm just Robbie.Carman. Good way to remember my last name. It's one car, one man, not a car with multiple men in it. Yeah, I'm always on those Facebook groups as well and answering questions and talking. Like I said, I like talking, if you haven't noticed. So that's always a fun one too.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for joining. It's been fun.
Mr. Eagles.
Yeah, you can obviously any of the training stuff on iColorist. You can find me on Insta, and if it's color grading from Australia, because apparently they do color down there, warreneagles.com.au.
Nice.
And Kevin.
Yep. So you can reach me, Kevs, Kevs at finalcolor.com. That's my company. If you have inquiries about workflow and so on, you can reach me individually. If you're looking at DIT and onset, Mission Digital, missiondigital.co.uk. And you can also reach me at the Colorist Society. And like the others, I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc.
Jeff?
I'm Jeff Greenberg. I'm Film Geek on all your favorite social platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I also happen to be the lead moderator of Colorist on Reddit. I would say I'm the top one there. I'm not, but I'm the only one who moderates, and I do the same thing for editors. I do some wonderful work with everybody here, whether it's around iColorist or with my friends Robbie and Joey. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this Ask the Experts part of Color Space Cadets. We'll be doing another Color Space Cadets podcast next month. And I hope
let us know. Whatever you guys out there listening, what do you want to do? Just put it in chat or put it on our feeds on our social medias, and we'll do it.
And the all HDR episode is the one that we really should do, guys. Yeah. And with that note, let's close this up. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody, wherever you are.